there is no contradiction between the words of the sages. They are just oscillating. They are putting the limits. They are purposefully putting oppositions for us to find the middle path.
Where do the sages make that statement as a rule of hermeneutics or of exegesis? I've heard this from Kabbalists that God is so great and He sanctified our judges with, even in many cases, Baruch HaKodesh, but I never heard it mentioned by an actual Tana, that this is going to be a principle that we don't make mistakes. Now, everyone knows Elu ve'elu dibur Elokim Chaim, but that refers to that as long as you held to an opinion that came from the court, you were justified before God, but not that the opinions didn't contradict each other. We know that Beit Shammai wouldn't give in to 18 gezerot. Why? They contradicted Beit Hillel, which the Amoraim teach is who we go by. But this is obviously post-Hillel. Why would they even almost give up their lives if there was no contradiction between both of their halachot? Also, what the Rambam brings down in his Hagdama to the Mishnah, the notion of halacha l'Moshe Sinai. And the idea of halacha l'Moshe Sinai, these are halachot that appear by Chazal with no argument, no machloket, no contradiction. So how do you feel about halacha l'Moshe Sinai?
Yeah, but you have to agree that it is so minuscule and limited, like 99.9% of the Talmud doesn't bring down the halacha, maybe apart from halacha l'Moshe Sinai.
I agree that it may not be so easy, to darshan, to extract halachot straight from the Talmud, but there are many halachas that are straight.
So what is the Talmud for? I think it is for us to learn the debates and the modes of thinking, for us to have both these, oppositions in our heads, so we could find the middle path. And the middle path is the halacha, as it says, you shall not stray to the right nor to the left. Stay in the middle, basically.
Initially, there was no Talmud and there was no Mishnah. So we can assume what's the Talmud for? Like when they wrote the Talmud,
wanted us to learn how the courts thought, how they operated mentally, and that's why it's not a separate entity.
Chazal believe that they sinned by writing down the Mishnah because their understanding was the Mishnah or Torah Sheba'al Peh was meant to remain oral. But you're saying that the goal of writing the Mishnah is for us to...
It is for us to be able to think as they were thinking when they judged, basically, on halacha.
So the reason they wrote the Mishnah is because the Beit Din was going to be dismantled and people were going to forget the halachot. But their understanding was to give us the actual binding halachot in the most clear way possible. Not for us to learn, because it was never meant for the average person to pick up the Mishnah and live out Judaism. Even after the Mishnah, where they had the role of the Reish Galuta, they had the 2 yeshivot in Bavel. I understand what you're saying. Well, there's a statement in the Rambam that says, what does it bring down, or what the opinions we don't go by in the Gemara? And then it says, so you should know the sources of erroneous arguments, not to make the same arguments. But it sounds different than what you're saying. Now,
because it is different.
Even according to that statement, drashic ideas, agadot, things that have nothing to do with halakha. Actually, that's a principle in halakha. Anything in rabbinic literature that doesn't deal with law is considered agadah. If you read the Hagdama in Yaakov, the one they typically use is the one written by Avram ben Avraham, the introduction to Agadah. It says that one is not legally judged as some sort of heretic just because he doesn't take Agadot seriously. It says you could accept them, you could not accept them. If they contradict anything in the Torah, they're ultimately disposable.
Disposable, okay, but no. How are they contradicting the Torah?
No, I'm saying if they contradict anything in the Torah, like saying that one must believe X, Y, and Z in order to be validated as a kosher Jew, they're ultimately disposable. Nothing metaphysical sticks outside of the Torah. To believe in Torah Sheba'al Peh does not include with the belief of metaphysical ideas that appear amongst Chazal, because they constantly contradict themselves.
What about, but I disagree with you that Chazal contradict themselves. It's just that there is a certain mode of teaching through supposedly teaching through contradiction, and it's up to us to see that there are no contradictions, and really it's there to teach us something way deeper. But anyway, regardless, I wanted to ask you, what about...
Wait, hold on. let's just stay on that topic. But do you understand that Chazal spanned many hundred years from each other? In other words, the Amoraim many times lived 300, sometimes 400 years from Tanaim and Zugot. In other words, how can they not contradict each other? The whole basis of a machloket means that this guy is saying X and this guy is saying Y. Someone's saying that this is halach leMoshe Sinai, and this other person is saying it's completely the Rabbanan. I mean, how do you not see that sometimes Chazal do contradict each other?
Isaiah lived roughly the same span of time for Moses, even more. And if you claim that, well, there might have been contradiction between Isaiah and Moses, then I am sorry, you are going to be considered quite a meshuga in practically all Orthodox communities. If you're
what does Isaiah have to do with who we consider Chazal? I mean, I understand that Isaiah also sat in a court, but we're talking about Mishnaic literature.
No, it's just an example where you say, well, there was so much time between them, then there must have been a contradiction. Or there's been a lot of time between Isaiah and Moses.
That the members of the Sanhedrin, they had Ruach HaKodesh, and their rulings came straight from God. Because Isaiah, well, Yeshayahu would say, thus says the Lord. In other words, like he had a task.
Isn't a scholar better than a prophet?
No. I'm asking if the judge had Ruach HaKodesh. As a matter of fact, how did the court judge? Here, was it by divine inspiration or was it solely by vote?
Solely by vote, and yet it is believed and even brought down, I believe, that whatever the vote was, just so happened to be the will of heaven, basically.
No, it doesn't say that. Torah lo b'shamayim hi. Are you familiar with Masechet Horayot?
I am not a great Talmud scholar, no.
Okay, fine. So Masechet Horayot, also found in Hilchot Sheragot of the Rambam, the Mishnah Torah, deals with the errors of the Beit Din Hagadol. In other words, whenever the court that would make a mistake, teaching that they did make a mistake, i.e. their rulings weren't always the will of God, they had to bring a korban. But the mitzvah of lo tasur, of not being a Baal Tosif, means that you shouldn't stray from what this court decides, no matter what like a bat kol would say. So, I mean, the court definitely makes mistakes, and there's definitely contradictions in the Talmud. So we have a hard enough time justifying Torah, and I live by Torah. But to say that Chazal never contradicted each other, is that statement just on halachot or on midrashim as well?
It's not on halachot because the Talmud doesn't, even the Gemara doesn't really bring down the halakha. It brings down the discussion, and you may say, okay, Rabbi so-and-so says this, and then Rabbi so-and-so says completely opposite thing.